Alrighty, welcome to it. It is another brand new episode. What is this, 63 of Bet Parks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. 63. We're about to pile a shitload more than 63 on with the upcoming season. I can't wait. And we're going to be going to an increased schedule as well. More details on that coming up next week. But let me tell you about Bet Parks because, oh man, you had Thursday Night Football last night. The Bills and the Rams and the Bills took it -1 in the game, but took it easily. You got a full slate of college football this weekend. You got a full slate of pro football this weekend. That's already kicked off. You've got baseball winding down. You've got hockey around the corner, hoops around the corner, and it's a great time to get the Bet Parks app because it's easy to use, simple to use, faster to win than ever before. You can bet same-game parlays, live in-game betting, player performances, exact score, first to score, you name it. It is all there on the Bet Parks app. This is actually a good time to get in some last-minute futures on football for the season. It's also a good time to check out the futures for hoops and hockey and tons more, and also a good time to look at some of the futures in Major League Baseball for the playoffs and the series. So check it out. Check out the Bet Parks app. It is awesome. It is the greatest time of year. Gambling is like sports gambling is going to go through the roof now because there's so much more going on than just baseball. Not to mention tennis, golf, Formula One, and so much more. Check out the Bet Parks app today. You do need to be over 21, present in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER and use the promo code JASON750 and get a $750 risk-free bet. But just by using that promo code for new and existing users, terms and conditions do apply. Let's go north of the border and bring them in right now from Montreal in Quebec. It is Anthony DeMarco from the fourth period. What's up, Ant?
What's going on, buddy? I'm recording like a pilgrim today. I'm in the process of moving. All my stuff is packed away. So yeah, doing it on the phone.
Yeah, you're boxing it up all and going to the new place, which is great.
Yeah.
But we actually have some interesting things to talk about because, when Torts was hired this summer, Torts is very blunt. And one of the points that he made repeatedly in his media availabilities and some one-on-one, certainly made it in the one-on-one with me, was the room and getting the room right. I think the term he used with me was fractured.
Splintered.
Splintered, fractured room in regards to how it's been here in Philadelphia. Now, Claude Giroux was the captain for a long period of time. He's moved on, obviously. He's now a member of the Ottawa Senators. But Torts was on with Boomer on NHL Network Radio. I guess it was the Flyers team preview that he was doing. And here's what Torts had to say in regard. Let me take that off there. There we go. Here's what Torts had to say in regards to the Flyers locker room, Boomer's question.
Claude Giroux is not there. It was his team for a decade. He had a little stopover in Florida. Now he's in Ottawa. What are your thoughts on the evolution of the room post-leader like that? And is it important in your mind at any point that the Flyers name a new captain?
Let's go with the latter question. I am in no rush to name a captain. So that's that. And as far as the room, I have major concerns about the room. As far as I've spent the summer going back and forth. I live in New York. I've been going back and forth to Philly trying to relocate there, but spent some time in the office talking to players, talking to personnel, talking to Chuck, all the front office. And I have major concerns about what goes on in there. And before we even step on the ice, situations and standards and accountability in the room is forefront. And you can't get squat done on the ice until you get your room straightened out. And I think we have a little bit of work to do there.
All right, so you can't get squat done until you get your room straightened out. Now, the thing I find a little, look, I think there's work to be done in the room. I totally agree with Torts. But it's odd to me, Ant, that he's been so vocal about something that he hasn't experienced and he's just heard about secondhand. This, to me, is him drawing a line in the sand and finding a calling card right away.
Well, it tells me, and you could speak to this better than me because you've been so intimately involved in the team for so many years, that during the hiring process, this was probably a big talking point and something that was very important to Flyers management. And look, how many times has Danny Briere over the last several months, even in his interview with the NHL Network at the draft, where he talked about, they got to get that culture back, that Flyers culture. And I think that the biggest thing about bringing Torts in was weeding out who the problem children are. And, he had a bit of a quote about Ivan Provorov. We know that, Provorov over the last year or so has been questionable in terms of his attitude. You now see a new leadership group kind of coming in, although we don't know who that leadership group is going to be. But all it tells me is that he's probably spoken to some players and he's heard from management, Chuck, Brent, Danny, whoever else, that there are problems in that room and there is a lack of accountability. And we know that since the 2020 bubble in Toronto, that it has been not a good scene behind the scenes that led to AV getting fired, that led to not a huge turnaround under Mike Yeo. And you know what? I don't think that this is some big revelation. I think we knew this is what was a big problem. I think it's more just how impactful it was to hear the head coach say this on national network radio.
Yeah, and he hasn't shied away from it at all. And, Torts is going to find some things right away that he's going to preach and that he's going to demand. And he needs, right out of the gate, something to catch their attention, right? And this is what he's going with. And look, I don't think it's a bad thing. On Monday's Flyers Daily, I guess it was Tuesday because we were off Monday for Labor Day, but with Bill Meltzer, I said to Bill, really the episode was about this. It was about two words. This season is not about wins and losses. And you go, well, pro sports is always about wins and losses. But to me, this season is more about two other words, not wins and losses, culture and standard. And I listened to that, and Torts must have listened to the episode because he used the word standard quite a bit. a standard of play, and a standard of the way you conduct yourself, a standard of preparedness and culture, and regaining a culture that's well-defined and very entrenched and is a religion. And to me, that's the job number one for Torts, is to get those culture and standard things in order before he can get wins and losses, because wins and losses very often are a byproduct of culture and standard.
And he said it that they can't worry about getting wins and success on the ice until they fix what's going on in the room. And that's why, if you rewind back to free agency, and let's say they had signed Johnny Gaudreau, and let's say they had, added a centerman for the 3C, let's just, for example, say Dylan Strome, which a lot of people wanted. Those are good on-ice moves. Those are good on-paper acquisitions. But if you still have problem children in the room, it's all going to be for naught, and you're going to be just kind of compounding an issue, kind of like what we saw last year. They made some, culture changes in terms of, let's say, the Jake Voracek move, moving on from a long-standing defenseman, Shane Gostisbehere, but they were just kind of trying to add talent. And while I think they did add talent and the roster was better on paper, injuries kind of derailed that plan. It's clear that there is an issue in the room. And let's take Ivan Provorov, for example. I'm obviously a big fan of Ivan Provorov on the ice, and I think he can be a number one defenseman. And I like that defensive group on paper. But let's just say for argument's sake, he turns out to be a problem child, and you cannot move forward with Ivan Provorov. Well, then this isn't a defense that's set to win now. And in turn, it wouldn't have made sense to add talent. So this is why I understand. And look, I think that we've talked about this ad nauseum, where the messaging wasn't right. I think they kind of stepped over each other's words. I think they pedaled back at the 11th hour. But this is why I think that ultimately kind of having what was the word that Chuck used, a stabilization year?
Yeah, year of stabilization.
That's why I think that ultimately, although the road to get here was very, very windy and tipsy and turvy and bumpy along the way, I think the ultimate destination was the right one, because at the end of the day, you can't be adding big time talent and handing out multi-million-dollar contracts when there are so much concerns about the room.
Yeah, and because you're right, you want to spend that money strategically. But if Ivan Provorov is a guy that doesn't fit in culturally and standard wise, now we know he's a guy that answers the bell. He's only missed a couple of games because of asymptomatic COVID, and he was pissed that he missed games, right? He's a warrior. He answers the bell every time. He plays hard. He plays a lot of minutes. He takes his, role as a professional player extremely serious. I mean, he trains as much as anybody. He's as physically fit as anybody, all those things. But sometimes personality fits into it. Is he a personality that fits, maybe, is the question, to the culture and standard that they want moving forward. And if he's not, then you have to allocate your dollars differently, because now all of a sudden a top pairing defenseman is a guy that has to go.
Exactly.
And obviously, that's just a hypothetical. I don't know if that's the case or will be the case. But, based on his comments at the press conference at the end of last year, where he was very salty, those questions are legit. So the year of stabilization, I agree with you. It was a long and winding road to get there, the old Beatles song. and I think they ended up in the right spot. It pissed a lot of fans off along the way, because you get, just the notion of grabbing a certain player. Sometimes you feel like you lost something even though you never had it. And that's a tough feeling for a fan base that's been through it the last 2 years.
And you kind of were beating this drum that you were going to have this aggressive retool, and we heard the rumors about Johnny Gaudreau. We know that they like Johnny Gaudreau. I can tell you that with certainty. They strongly considered a lot of avenues how to get him here. But I think that even you had said this, that the idea of getting Johnny Gaudreau was so tantalizing that it kind of warped the vision, and myself included, of how the Flyers were going to perform on a macro scale. Because let's say you add Johnny Gaudreau to this roster. You found a way to ship out JVR. You add Johnny Gaudreau, and they're a better team. But let's say there are problems in that room where, let's just use Provorov as a hypothetical, where Provorov has to go. Let's say Travis Konecny's beyond reparation here. He has to go. And now all of a sudden, you're without a number one defenseman, you're without a top six winger, and now how much farther are you back from hypothetically being a cup contending team, which is like a move that, let's say, handing out that type of contract theoretically would be reserved for.
Yeah.
So, I think that next year, which I believe is a better free agent crop personally, and I think that next year you're better set up to, go through an entire year, figure out who's going to be here for the long term, and then have a better idea of where you're going to have to allocate that money. Is Provorov a guy that can be counted on for the long term here? Can Konecny be salvaged in Philadelphia? These are questions that, in my opinion, need to be answered before you start handing out big-time contracts.
Couple that with a draft class next year that is superior, is going to be one of those draft class that's been compared to some of the great ones. The 03 draft and tremendous high-end talent in the first round. Couple that also, Travis Sanheim is entering the final year of a deal up against UFA status. You got to figure all this stuff out before you really plot your future as a franchise. And the thing that Torts is saying that you really got to figure out is the culture and standard first and foremost, because you can have talent, but without culture and standard, none of it matters, because you're not a winning team, because you don't have a winning culture and a winning standard. So I agree. I think the timeline and where they ended up is the right place. But yeah, I mean, we know, they liked Gaudreau. Gaudreau liked them,
Big time. Big time.
It's weird because I talked to JVR on, I think it was Wednesday. He's in today's Flyers Daily as my guest. And I've known James since he came into the league in 2009, right, in his rookie year. And he's a guy that when he first came in was kind of an interview where you just got really nothing. But now he's a very cerebral guy. He's been in the league, 13 years or whatever. He's played almost 900 games. And I asked him straight up, I said, dude, you've been around this a long time. This isn't new to you. Your name was out there. You know it was out there as a guy that was going to be shipped off. How did you deal with it over the summer? And he said, well, first of all, because it was over the summer, it's a little easier because you're not in the day-to-day grind of media and all that. And you want to compartmentalize it and control what you can control in training and get ready. But he said he totally understood it because they're a team that, was way out of the playoffs. And when you're way out of the playoffs, there's going to be changes. And when you're a high-paid player, you could be part of that change. He totally got it. I thought he handled it well.
Well, look at the last 12 months. Voracek, a high-paid player, was shipped off. At the time, the second highest-paid forward on the team. Giroux was shipped off. Gostisbehere, who had a decent paycheck, was shipped off. And look, for James Van Riemsdyk, I mean, he's become a very polarizing player on this team, probably second behind Rasmus Ristolainen. And it isn't always fair, the criticisms that come against JVR, because he is a guy that is a slam dunk for typically 20 goals. He can give you decent minutes in your middle six. I thought last year was like the first season where like his underlying numbers kind of suffered and his overall game just wasn't up to par. But I mean, who did have a good season last year? They were few and far between on the Flyers. But I think JVR at the end of the day is just a solid professional. If I'm not mistaken, is he or was he their player rep for the Players Union?
Still is, yeah.
He still is.
And it's HLPA rep.
So he's a consummate professional, and I would expect nothing else. But like, look, I was told by a Western Conference general manager a few months ago when I brought up JVR, he just chuckled and said, yeah, nobody's touching that guy. And that's a guy who's like slam dunk for 20 goals. But at the same time, that's not a slight on JVR, because a guy who's a slam dunk for 35 goals and sometimes 40 in Max Pacioretty was traded for nothing and actually had to be packaged with a young defenseman. So, I mean, I don't think what happened with JVR was a slight on the player. I just think it was more a testament to the times right now and how there is just absolutely no money around the league. And JVR was kind of just a byproduct of that, or a victim of that, rather. And, you know, I think what you're seeing now is a lot of players in the middle are being squeezed more and more. And you're seeing less and less of those $3 to $5 to $6 million contracts. And it's all the guys eating it up at the top. And JVR is the type of player who at this point in his career is a middle six guy, third line player, depending on what team he is. And there's just not a lot of teams with an appetite or the cap space to pay that guy $7 million.
And yeah, I mean, the thing, like, James is not one of those guys that is a distraction, or the way he prepares. I mean, he's one of the most open-minded preparers, and the way he has engaged sports science and the way he prepares his body, his mind, and everything. So I just got a note from a guy that Philly Original says JVR is no longer the Flyers player rep. He passed that torch on to Sanheim. So it's Travis Sanheim is now, who, by the way, I talked to this week as well. And talking to Sandy, you know, he's going into this UFA year. And he talked about, you and I have talked about this quite a bit on the pod, off the pod, and on social media about that, you know, chemistry with Rasmus Ristolainen. And he talked about it, that playing with Risto really helped him be able to do what he did last year. So that chemistry is there, and he's looking to recapture that again this year. But, you know, it's an interesting year for Sanheim, because pending where the team is depends on what he does and where he goes. And if he's traded at the deadline for assets on an expiring deal, or he ends up re-signing here. So there's a lot of question marks here. There's so many questions, you know, coming into this season. I don't recall, you know, a list of pertinent, consequential questions like we're going to have going into this season at any time that in my time covering the Flyers, which has been a long time, that, you know, there's just such an extended list of these questions that need to be answered. And you can't just, you know, give an answer now. It takes time to find the answer.
Well, like going back to the Holmgren years, and probably even before then, but I only really started following hockey like religiously in the Holmgren years. You've always been able to kind of like mock up a depth chart, save for maybe a spot or two. But this season, like, you can make the case that like 5 out of the 6 spots in the bottom 6 are up for grabs. You know, maybe the defense is more set in stone, but like even Cam York, I think he's going to make the team, but maybe he has some more challenge from a guy like Zabula. Maybe Ronnie Attard really pushes a guy like Justin Braun. And look, some questions are good, like what young players are going to push through. Some questions are more negative, like, you know, how is, let's say, Tony DeAngelo and Ivan Provorov going to fit together? Like, that could easily go sideways. I'm more on the positive side, but it could. Or how's the goaltending going to look? A lot of people are more negative on that side. And I do think the long-term outlook for the defense is a huge question mark, because I just look at it financially. And, you know, Ryan Ellis, we know he's not going to start the season. I was told that there's no timeline for him to even come back. No one has like a set approximate date. So right now he's not even a factor. But
he's been week to week since last November.
Do you remember when AV said if it was playoffs, he would be playing? Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. What a crock of you know what that was. But I mean, even Ryan Ellis or no Ryan Ellis, I can't see a world where this time next year we're sitting here and talking about Ivan Provorov and Travis Sanheim on the same team. My opinion.
Yeah. I think that's
And
unlikely too.
And, I think as of today, right today, I think Travis Sanheim is probably a $6 million defenseman in the NHL. I look at the Torrey Krug contract that he got with the St. Louis Blues, what was it, 2 years ago? And I say that's kind of like the bar. Let's say you go a bit longer with years. I don't know if Krug got 6 or 7, but if you went 8 years, let's say 8 times 6 for Sanheim. But if he plays the way he's played the last 18 months, more specifically last year, would it be far-fetched to see him even going to 6.5, 6.75? Now you're in Ivan Provorov money. And I mean, I think that's going to be the biggest question mark, because let's say even Provorov does play very well this year, but Sanheim plays very well too, and York plays very well. I don't think York's going anywhere, but let's say Sanheim and Provorov do both play the way that they've played. Let's say Sanheim last season and Provorov gets his game back to 2019-20. At that point, Jay, like, where are you more leaning with it?
Yeah, I mean, if York plays really well, is he a top pairing left side guy, or is he more allocated to be a second pairing? Now I have 2 second pairing guys in York and Sanheim. One's on the UFA contract, one's on, his rookie deal. And, the cap's going to go up, but it's not going up yet, and it ain't going to go up $12 million year to year. The ceiling's not going to escalate like that. So, there's a lot of questions about it. How do you fit that? That's the thing for a general manager. You have this puzzle you're putting together, and sometimes we look at it as fans as a 2-dimensional puzzle, but it's not. It's like 6D. It's, you got to figure out what's coming. How does it fit going forward? Not just next year, but 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
Because, having Cam York and just, if you have Provorov and Sanheim and just say he's absolutely going to stay on the left side, did you draft him where you drafted him and develop him the way he's developed to be a third pairing defenseman? I don't think so.
And you look at what they have coming up the pike, specifically on the left side. You have Emile Andre, who was a standout at the NHL, at the World Junior Hockey Championship. No, I think he's 2 years away. He's going to spend the year over in Sweden. I think they'll bring him over next season. He'll spend a full year in the AHL. You have Adam Ginning, who's coming over to the AHL. I don't think he has an enormously high ceiling, but I spoke to someone with the Flyers, and he said that, Robert Hagg is something that's probably attainable for him. You have Igor Zamula, who I think that if he can just put on some muscle mass and like get his body physically mature enough to play in the NHL, his mind and his skill set is already there. And what do you know? These are all left shot defensemen. And sure, maybe one of the guys can, convert over to the right side. Maybe Ginning's that guy. We saw Hagg play the majority of his time in Philadelphia on the right side. But after that, like, how many guys are you going to force over? I think Ristolainen's here for the long term. I think one of DeAngelo and Ryan Ellis will be here for the long term. And like you said, your next question is Cam York going to be a top pairing defenseman? Because I love the way Sanheim's played. I think he's been excellent the last 18 months, but I still don't want him in a top pairing role, personally.
To me, he's a really good second pairing left side defender.
Yeah. And
I think you're just asking the guy to do too much. And for the way, it's not only, just, the skill set, whatever, the pedigree, but to me, it's what you want to get out of him. And you want to get that offensive rush play out of him. And to do that on a second pairing is more ideal in his situation, I think.
And the other thing is that your number one or top pairing defenseman, typically you want them to be all situations. And that's what kind of Provorov is. And Sanheim, he's an amazing 5-on-5 defenseman. I think among second pairing D, you could probably put him in the elite class. Like, there's not many second pairing defensemen I'd want in the NHL more than Sanheim, but he's never been a strong special teams guy. Like, the power play, I guess we haven't seen a big enough sample size, but he's had how many coaches now? Hackstall, Gordon, AV, none of them put him on the power play for a sustained amount of time. And he's not a strong PK guy. So I just think, and you've said this so many times, is that you've found a situation where you've unlocked Sanheim, and I would just be very hesitant to defer from that road.
Yeah, and put him in a different situation that could re-lock him in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
The role he's in, I think, is the ideal role as a second pairing left side guy. And why fuck with that when
Yeah.
you don't have to? And get what you can from him at both ends of the ice. I mean, that second pairing played a lot of minutes last year. Sometimes they played more minutes than the top pair, including
For
Sanheim
sure.
playing more than Provorov at times, which was a bit of an eye opener when we saw that on a number of occasions last year. So
5-on-5 specifically.
oh yeah, big time. And you're right. He's not a PK guy. He's not a power play guy. He's a 5-on-5 defender. He'll play a little bit of PK, but Provorov in all situations guy. Although I don't prefer him on the power play.
Same. I agree. I think Provorov, I would like to see him as a trigger man on the power play because I do think his shot is excellent.
Yeah.
And in
19...
Yeah, PP2, exactly. And I remember in 1920 when he had, what was it? Was that the year he had 18 goals and he led the NHL in power play goals from defensemen or something?
Yeah, I think he had 17 goals that year, I thought. But yeah, right around there.
And he wasn't creating a lot. If you look at the underlying numbers, he wasn't generating a lot in terms of, let's say, expected goals for on the power play, but his finishing was elite, a 99 percentile.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that's something you could maybe try and tap into.
Yeah, he had 17 goals in 17-18.
Oh, wow.
17 goals that year. And only two of the goals came on the power play, 15 even strength goals. But the next year, he had 7 all even strength, and then 6 even strength goals. The year after that, where he had 13 goals. On the power play that year, he had 7 power play goals in 1920. 7 power play goals. That's pretty incredible. Yeah, I mean, more power play goals, 7, than he did even strength at 6. I mean, that's pretty darn good. And that was, mind you, that was in 69 games that year because that was the shortened season. He finished with 36 points. He was probably pacing to have his best season points-wise and goal-wise in the NHL.
Oh, well, that year, as a transition defenseman, he was borderline elite. And his finishing was very good.
Niskanen.
Yeah. I think that year he was on a trajectory to be a top 10 defenseman in the NHL.
Yeah.
That year.
150 shots on goal that year, 8.7 per game. And in the 17-18 season, he had 203 shots on goal for an average of 8.4 when he had the 17 goals and 24 assists. So, yeah, I mean, that's certainly an element of it. I could see him on PP2 with a Cam York out there as well.
Yeah.
A lot of times on PP1, it's one defenseman. That'll be D'Angelo, right? And then PP2, if Ryan Ellis isn't in the lineup as we expect, I imagine it's going to be Cam York, Ivan Provorov, and then your second power play unit up front.
To be honest, I know that they've had a refusal to do this, but I would like to see Ristolainen because he's had success on the power play in Buffalo.
He's got a bomb, man. A bomb for a shot.
And not to mention that he's actually a good forechecker. The few times that he would not lead the rush, but he would be the first one in, let's say when the forwards were on a line change or something. But yeah, he has a bomb of a shot. He's had how many 40-point seasons that came because of his time on the power play. But I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I understand that last year they were really trying to make the Sanheim Ristolainen pair their 5-on-5 pair. But I'm wondering now that you have a legit, I would say, top pair, I would say Provorov, D'Angelo, and that third pair, because you're essentially subbing out Sealer and Yandel for York and Justin Braun. And it's an amazing upgrade. And your top pair now isn't a complete, I think last year their top pair was probably bottom 5 in the NHL because Justin Braun just should not be anywhere near top pair. Yeah. And now you could say it's more in the middle of the road. Their second pair is very good, and I think their third pair has the potential to be very good. So I think that it's going to allow for Bradshaw to really kind of mix and match here and kind of allocate the time on ice much better and subsequently get more out of each guy.
And I think the pairs just fit better together because you have a puck mover or a guy on every pairing that can exit the zone very effectively. Cam York is a very good passer. And Sanheim's the guy decent passer, but good at using his legs to skate his way out
Very
of trouble.
Coburn-esque.
Very, long, a guy like that. Not a really physical big guy, but and then obviously on the top pair, D'Angelo's a good passer as well. Provorov's a good retrieval guy. So there's a lot of elements there. I think defense could be a lot better, and the byproduct of that also could be, if the team defense is there and in zone, D zone defense and structures there, then all of a sudden the goaltenders look a lot better too. And I mean, that obviously goes to Hart, but the other part of that is going to be Sandstrom, and because I think he's going to end up being the backup, and we'll see about that. That's one of those question marks for me going into the season is Felix Sandstrom. Small sample size. I've liked what I've seen, but the sample size at the NHL level is still so small.
It's tough, but look, I'm one of the guys that I wanted them to bring back. I wanted them to run with Felix Sandstrom or Ivan Fedotov. And obviously Fedotov was a guy that had much more upside based on what he has done in Russia the last few years. But I didn't want another Martin Jones or Jaro Halak or Thomas Greiss. I wanted to see what you had with one of these guys. And look, small sample size last year, but even Sandstrom's expected save percentage, all that, or goals saved above expected, whatever the metric's called, were strong. And a very small sample size, but I think you have something with this guy that, even if he's not great, how much worse is he going to be than Martin Jones? How much worse is he going to be than Brian Elliott? I think that even at that, you're going to have an improval in the goaltending. And I think you have a guy, maybe not for Jones because he was more or less durable, but because Sandstrom is a young guy, I think he's going to be more durable, that if he has to string together some games, because we know Hart has battled some injuries, I think you're better suited for. I don't know, you're way more, knowledgeable about the goaltending position than me, but I'm very excited to see what Sandstrom could bring this year.
Well, to me, in really thinking about it, it fits into everything else. It fits into the year of stabilization.
Yeah.
It's about finding out what guys are. And because he has the small look, everybody has a small sample size at some point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you got to take a little bit of a flyer sometimes, pardon the pun, and go, I got to find out what this guy is. There's only one way to find out what a guy is. That's to fucking play. You don't find out what he is in practice. I mean, you know what he is in practice. You know what he is as a pro and his preparation and his work ethic and all those things. I've talked to Dilly about him, Flyers goalie coach Kim Dillabaugh. I mean, they drafted him in 2015. I mean, they obviously know him very well.
And around for a while.
Yeah. So, I mean, they've worked with him obviously quite a bit. So I think it's a huge question mark coming into the season. But when you look at the congruent aspect of what this season is now, and we're going right back to where we started, is the year of stabilization and year of finding out and culture and standard, then it makes sense, I guess, to do that. I was a guy going, I'd like to come into the year with a little bit more, pedigree, and I love a veteran guy behind a young guy. Hart's still young, but he has played a lot in the NHL already, so he's maybe not as young as his birth certificate in NHL terms would, indicate.
For sure. And look, if the Flyers were a cup team, obviously we're worlds away from that at the moment, but would I be comfortable with this? No. I would have said, I want a guy like James Reimer, that kind of guy behind you, or an Antti Ranta, that type of, backup. I think that, like you said, traditionally, that's the best way to do it. Or what we're seeing in New York this year, Shesterkin with Jaro Halak. That's the way that the traditional type of goaltending tandem that we've seen. But there are just so many guys here that you have to find out what they are. Look, going back to 2017, we have been, me personally, Dan on Brotherly Pod, we've been wanting to see a 3C since the trade of Braden Shen. But now I'm at a point where I'm just because you're not really trying to win right now, is there a point to bring in a Dylan Strome? Or would you just be better off to see what Lazinski has, what Frost has, but next year at this time, what Denwyer has? Because you're not really trying to win at this point, you might as well just see what some of these centermen have.
Yeah, this is a huge inventory project to find out who's for real for the NHL, for the pro game, and who's not. And then if you don't have that piece, then you can make the decision to go out after a Dylan Strome type 3C player that can help you. If it's not in house, if it's in house, it's great because it's not going to cost you as much as one of these young guys on an ELC. So that's a big part of it too. And we still are essentially in this flat cap world, and that's just part of the equation.
Yeah.
So
no, that's exactly it.
All right, let's get out of here on that note. That was a punchy episode. We covered a lot. Started with torts. Let's see, we have a comment here. Let's see if it's worth putting up on the screen. And Steve, of course it is. Steve says, Ebinger, great show again, Jason. Thank you, Steve. You're a great listener.
What a dick. He didn't even recognize that I was here. I'm just kidding.
He knows you're there. But that'll put a wrap on it. That's episode 63. And get moved into the new place, all right? Good luck with the move and everything.
Appreciate
we'll talk to
it.
you next week from the new domicile.
Thanks, man. It's going to be a hell of a view. I'll give you that.
All right. And everybody, read Anthony's stuff at thefourthperiod.com, TFP, and also on Twitter at ADeMarco25. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, buddy. Take it easy.
There he is. Anthony DeMarco on episode 63 of Bet Parks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. Oh, man, a lot to cover there. It's ready to pop off. All of it's ready to happen here for this season. Rookie camp starts on Wednesday. Rookie games next weekend. Full training camp on the 21st on the ice, I think on the 22nd, which is 2 weeks from yesterday. So first preseason game is 15 days away, the 24th. So we're right there. So a lot to get to and tons to get to here on Stick to Hockey Live. And as I said, we'll be expanding our coverage this season even further. And we'll get out to all the details on that coming up next week on next week's episode. But that'll put a wrap on this one. But get the Bet Parks app because you can get your action in all the hockey stuff that's coming, futures. And then once the games start, same game parlays, live in-game betting, player performances, you name it, it's all there. Props, teasers, parlays, all alternate lines. You can do that on all the football action coming up this weekend, both in pro and college. Oh, man, it is all going on. How about the end of the baseball season and right into the MLB playoffs? You can get all your action there as well. And all those same things. Same game parlays, player performances, live in-game betting. It's all available for you. So check it out. Check out the Bet Parks app. Easy to use, easy to navigate, faster to win than ever before. Make sure you punch in that code JASON750, JASON 750. That's going to give you a $750 risk-free bet. Now, that's for new and existing users. So, again, JASON750, punch that promo code in. You'll get that $715 $15 risk-free bet, and terms and conditions do apply. So check it out. Get the Bet Parks app. You do need to be over 21 and present in Pennsylvania or New Jersey. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Beautiful weather outside, a little chillier. We're on our way, people. On our way. Thanks for watching Bet Parks Presents Stick to Hockey Live. We will talk to everybody next week as rookie camp will be underway. That and much more. Have a great weekend, everybody.